Welcome back, guys. It's day 2, and today you're going to be hearing from this guy named Bob Mortimer. Fun fact about Bob Mortimer, his favorite food in the world is popcorn. Today he's going to share a story about hope. Don't forget to enter the daily giveaway today. This is your chance to win some Starbucks cards or a t-shirt, and of course, get you entered into our grand prize, the new Mavic Mini drone. Pay attention because we're asking a special question during the video. When you have the answer, you're going to DM only 7 seconds on Instagram or text the number on the screen. Every day you enter, you could win a daily prize, plus you get an entry for the grand prize. That means you could have up to 4 entries for the grand prize. All you guys gotta do is watch some videos and you get to win some really cool prizes.
Hey, how you guys doing? My name is Bob, by the way. Good to talk to you during these quarantine times. Let me get my gear off. And it's really a great time to be outside because actually we can't be in too many other crowded places. But as I said, my name is Bob Mortimer. I live in the state of Washington. And I've got a great message for you today. I want to talk about hope. If you're curious about what hope might be, the best definition I can give you is hope is the expectation that things are going to get better than they are now. Hope is what allows us to keep moving forward day to day. Makes our future look bright. What I want to talk to you about today is a little bike ride I took a few years back. How do you like my bike, by the way? I know, technically a tricycle has 3 wheels, but trust me, I prefer if you call it a bike. This is my hand cycle. Let me just give you a quick little review of it here. I actually crank it with my arms, or arm, as the case may be. I pedaled this bike all the way from Seattle to the Statue of Liberty in New York City. We called the ride Hope and Courage Across America. And we had a very simple message we wanted to share. We need hope. Hope is what keeps us going. But we also need the courage to use that hope when things aren't going the way we want them to. And I know many of us can relate to that right now. We're in a different time right now. We've never had a period like this in America in the last 100 years. And what you're going through as teenagers is very unique. And it's something that you will have to talk about the rest of your life. But I want to tell you about this ride across America. I want to talk about the day we had to pedal over Snoqualmie Pass. Snoqualmie Pass will end up being the biggest mountain that we will face on our 2,500-mile journey from Seattle to New York City. And we come out onto Snoqualmie Pass. We start out at the base. Let me tell you what the day is. When we start out that day, it's 22 miles to the top of the pass. The first 15 miles are a slow, steady incline, very much like this. That's the first 15 miles. The last 7 miles are more like this. We started out that morning, and when I say we, who I'm specifically talking about is myself, my wife, Darla, and we had 2 of our children with us that day. We had our 16-year-old son, Grant, our 19-year-old daughter, Nicole, and we were pedaling across America as a family to share a message of hope. I remember we started out on that first 15 miles, and I'm cranking along. I'm actually leading the way. I'm in front of my wife. I'm in front of my 2 children. I'm leading my way. I'm watching my speedometer down here, and the morning goes by. At the end of those 15 miles, I'm looking at my clock, and I'm actually averaging 6 miles an hour. Now, before you come up to me someday and tell me how fast you can ride your bike, I want to remind you, I pedal this bike with 1 arm. I'm happy with my 6 miles an hour. Then we hit that next 7 miles. We begin that climb really up to the pass itself. and I start clicking my gears. I'm clicking my gears. This bike is really kind of clever. Everything I do is right here on this handle. These are my shifters right here, my thumb shifters. This is my brake. I can brake, I can shift, and never take my hand off of this crank as I'm pedaling. We hit that last 7 miles, and I'm hitting my gears, and I'm shifting down, and I'm watching my speedometer. 5 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour, 2 miles an hour. I've lost all momentum. And what that really means is, if I stop pedaling this bike stops immediately. And I begin to hunker down. My kids go on ahead. They can pedal faster than 2 miles an hour. Darla can go ahead and pedal with the kids, Darla, my wife. But Darla doesn't. Darla stays back and she rides with me. 2 miles an hour. Let me give you a little bit of lesson in life. Sometimes when you're going through something tough, you have to go through it with other people. And every time you do that, there's usually one of you that is going to struggle more than the other. And that makes it difficult. And if you're the person struggling, you're doing the best you can. Trust me, 2 miles an hour was all I could do going up that hill. And the other person next to you may be able to do it better. And for that person, they may be tempted to go on ahead and let you catch up later. If you're that other person, let me give you this advice. Why don't you consider staying back and staying next to your friend, going through this at their pace so that they don't have to go through it alone? Because everyone matters, because you matter. And it matters if you stay there and help others. It really is not going to do us much good to get ahead of each other too much. We're still going to wait for you at the end, but we'd love to help you along the way. This is what Darla does for me. So anyway, back to my story. I'm pedaling up this mountain, and don't even tell me I have to pedal for 7 miles. 7 miles at 2 miles an hour, come on, do the math. I can't do that, not at what I'm putting into this. I'm gonna pedal a quarter of a mile. I break it down into little pieces that I can deal with because I really want to get to the top of that mountain. And I have this deep inside of me, this hope that I can make it to the end if I just keep moving. And I'm pedaling and I'm cranking. And as I go further and further, quarter mile, all of a sudden I begin to notice I'm getting this ache in my shoulder every time I push this handle forward. And the only thing that is making that go away is every time I pull this handle back, I'm getting a burn in my elbow. So now every move I make is creating pain. I'm aching, I'm burning, but I gotta keep going. And I gotta find a reason to keep going. And folks, kids, this is what it's about. Sometimes you have to find a reason to get up and take that next step forward, even when you don't think you want to, even when it doesn't make any sense. Anybody out there would have said, come on, why are you even trying to go over this mountain, pedaling this thing over there with one arm? Who expects that out of you? You can quit. Nobody's going to hold it against you. But this is something I wanted to do. And I had hope that if I would make it to the top, that things would get better. And one of the things that helped me to get to the top was I was able to look back and think, are there other situations in my life that I've had to deal with, that I've had to struggle with, that I've had to push through, and I did make it to the other end. And as I was cranking up there in the aching and the burning, I began to remember another time in my life. And my mind went back to when I was younger, 21 years old. 21 years old, I had an experience in my life that would drastically change the trajectory of my future. At the age of 21, my brother and I stumbled out of a tavern one night. I'd gotten caught up into the alcohol and drugs and the party scene as a teenager. And I know that you see a lot of that around you also. Very common in our society and in our culture. And it can be very devastating on our lives. I got tangled up into the alcohol and drug scene when I was about 15 to 16 years old. And it finally led to a night when I was 21. And my brother and I had left this tavern. We got into our car and we began to drive home. And it was on the way home that something happened. On the way home, the car went off the road, hit a power pole, slid down an embankment and came to rest at the bottom of a hill. I got out of the car, my brother got out of the car, and we looked at each other to see if we'd gotten hurt. There were no cuts, there were no scratches, nothing. We laughed and joked about what a great story this would make Monday morning, and we just walked away from that crashed car unharmed. Students, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is walk away unharmed. Every time we got away with it, every time we didn't get caught, every time we went out and did those things that we should not have been doing and got away with it, it just made us more confident and more bold. We began to think that we would never get hurt, could never get caught. But that night when we walked away from that crashed car unharmed, we didn't know. We didn't know that we'd hit a power pole. We didn't know that when we hit the pole, the crossarm snapped off. 4 power lines came down into the road. And I scrambled up that hill in front of my brother, walked out onto the highway. And when I did, my left arm hit one of those downed power lines. And I fell on my knees. Electricity will enter your body where you make contact with it. It will leave your body where you're making contact with something else. And in my story, that something else is my knees pressed against the ground. And 12,500 volts of electricity came through my arm, through my body, and exploded my knees away into the ground. I collapsed, I fell forward, I lay across the rest of the wires, and they just continued to burn the front of my body. I found out in an instant, sometimes you don't walk away. I woke up the next morning in a hospital in Seattle that would be my home for the next 6 months. And I'm not going to tell you much about those 6 months. I will tell you that the very first morning, the doctor asked me to sign a release so they could amputate my left arm. It was burned crisp and curled up from fingertip to elbow the last time I looked at it. He would come back 2 weeks later for my right leg. I would fight for my left one for several months before giving it up. And during this 6-month period, they would skin graft the front of my body. And then they would begin to retrain me on how to feed myself, how to dress myself. And after 6 months, I got out of the hospital. And I went right back onto the same road that brought me in there. Back to the parties, the drinking, and the drugs. And I thought it would bring me peace. I thought it would bring me comfort. I thought it would bring me joy, but it didn't bring me any of those things. In fact, it began to drain my hope. The opposite of hope is hopeless. And for 4 years, I continued on that journey until I got about to the bottom of that pit. I needed a friend. I met a friend, and that friend made me realize that there is hope. That friend made me realize that there is a future that could be better. And that friend made me realize that there is a better road to be on than the one that I'd been on. And that friend took me to a place where I could get help. I want to encourage you again with your friends right now. You're separated because you can't be in school together. You're separated because you can't go to where all the places you used to go. And some of you can begin to feel hopeless. Some of you can begin to feel isolated. This is time, as more than others, we need to reach out. And this is a time when you can really use that social media for really good stuff. Contact them in a personal way. Private message them. Hey, you want to do something really old-fashioned? Give them a call. Talk to them. Ask them how they're doing. Don't let them get away with the pat answer, everything's cool, everything's fine. Ask them again, how are you really doing? Give them an opportunity. You need to share with each other what you're feeling right now. As I said, nobody's been through this before. Us adults can give you examples in our lives of things that we think might be similar or may relate, but you need to understand, this quarantine is something very unique to you and your generation around you. And you need to show us how to get through it. You need to be the examples when this is done of how to survive. Talk to each other, reach out, let people know what's going on inside of you. Back in my day when I met this friend made me realize that things do not need to be hopeless. This friend took the time to reach into my life, to take the time to give me some advice. I asked for help, and that friend took me to get help. And I remember I went to that place to get help, and in that place I did find what I was searching for. I found hope. I found the opportunity there to put my faith into something that would give me the belief that there would be a better tomorrow, that these experiences I'm going through are only temporary, and that things could be better. And I remember that day making a decision that I didn't want to be on the road that I was on anymore. I wanted to be on a new road, a different road. So I made some very personal, life-changing choices. And I made those choices so that my life could be better. And the next thing I know, I'm leaving the drugs behind. I'm leaving the alcohol behind. I'm beginning to change my attitude. I'm beginning to change the way I look at myself in the mirror. Can you imagine the self-esteem issues I might have dealt with as that young man in my 20s, looking in the mirror and seeing scars where I used to have skin, stumps where I used to have limbs, and thinking nobody would care, nobody would accept me, nobody would like me looking like this. Well, I began to change the way I looked at myself and knew that, you know what? This is the way I look. This is who I am. And if you have a problem with that, I'll agree with you. You have a problem, but I don't. When I began to take that attitude toward myself, my life began to change dramatically. In fact, 6 months later, after finding that hope, after changing my life, I went back to that friend that I was talking about earlier, and I took her to a church and I married her. Her name is Darla, and she's been with me for almost 39 years now. We've pedaled across America. We've been up and down roads and journeys that we can only begin to try to put down and look at pictures and try to remember what we'd done before. But in my story previously, it's the same Darla that was pedaling alongside of me at 2 miles an hour up Snoqualmie Pass. And when I remembered that back in my day, back when I was in my early 20s, I'd faced a big challenge before, and that I came through and life was better, it gave me the hope that if I just keep pushing this bike up that hill, up that mountain, up Snoqualmie Pass, that you know what, I can make it to the top. And that's what I did. It took me all day, friends, literally. I was watching the sun go down behind me as I finally crested Snoqualmie Pass. And I sat up on the top of that hill, and I remember that the people came and slapped me on the back and congratulated me. But I also knew that I had just accomplished something that I did not think I would ever be able to do. And it was just the beginning. You know what's great about accomplishing one hill, getting to the top? It usually means there's a nice coasting downhill afterwards. And friends, there was 15 miles of a downhill run on the other side of the mountain. And I remember all I had to do was just steer that bike and keep it from going too fast. That was my reward. We made it across America. It was we had to still go another 2,400 miles, but you know what? It doesn't scare you so much once you've been through one thing. I want to encourage you right now that you have hope. If you don't have hope, if you're beginning to feel hopeless, talk to somebody. There are plenty of people around you that they will be glad to share their hope with you. Hope is the belief that, you know what, things are going to get better. We're not going to stay in this quarantine forever. Are things going to be the same when we come out of it? No, they're not. Nothing is ever the same. Life is dynamic. Life changes. But I know that this is an experience that you're going to share that can create in you something that will be lifelong, that you will benefit from in the future. So here's what I want to leave you with. Hope and courage. Find hope during this time, but then have the courage to use that hope so you can face what's ahead. Thank you so much. Again, Bob Mortimer, have a great day.